Hey Silken Slopes, I'm Clay Black, I'm with Method Communications. Today for this Silken Slopes breakfast we're excited to have Curtis Calder from Anson Calder be able to talk about his journey and things that he's learned as he's created this great brand in Utah. Curtis, welcome.
Thank you, I'm happy to be here.
Pretty new to Silken Slopes. You're not new to Utah, but tell us a little bit about Anson Calder.
Everybody in here has got a wallet. Wallets have been made for a long time, but they're not very functional. And that really was the genesis of the company, is making a wallet that is a lot easier to access.
Before starting Anson Calder, I worked in banking and constantly struggled to keep track of work receipts and endless business cards.
I really never thought I'd get into this, but I absolutely love it.
So you were raised in Utah.
Yeah.
Went to BYU.
Yeah.
Studied finance.
Yeah.
Went to Switzerland. Went to New York, and you were in investment banking.
Yeah. So I was an investment strategist. So I worked for the private bank, but managing money.
So you're managing a lot of money,
Yeah.
probably making a lot more than some people in investment banking,
And
right?
a lot more than I've made working in this company.
Yeah. And so tell us how you got from investment banking at JP Morgan to Anson Calder.
The real segue was I have a degenerative muscle disease. I don't like talking about it, but it's hard on anybody to work 100 plus hours a week, and banking is very demanding in a lot of hours. And I was having a lot of physical issues, and ultimately was diagnosed with a form of muscular dystrophy. So there are certain muscles that are degenerating and have completely degenerated, and it spreads throughout my body. It got so bad that my doctor finally convinced me to go on a medical leave of absence and said, look, Kurt, this is progressive. It should get worse over time. It shouldn't be this bad this fast. At this rate, you might be in a wheelchair in 5 or 10 years instead of 20 years. But ultimately, while I was on this medical leave of absence, my doctor said, in between physical therapy and everything else, you've got to stay active. But he said, rather than sitting at a computer, which is all you've been doing for years, find a way to do something to use your arms. And I was bored for a little while, and then decided to pull out my wife's sewing machine and teach myself how to sew, because I had 2 wallets I'd used in the last 10 years that I loved. One from a little hole in the wall in Tokyo and another one off the street in Venice. And I wanted a combination of both. I'd been looking for months in New York to try and find something to do what I wanted it to. And ultimately designed a wallet, made it, no intention of ever starting a business. And it turned into a really fun hobby. And my wife and I started making stuff. It was literally in our kitchen in our 1-bedroom apartment, and our 2 kids had the bedroom, and we were, really used it as a studio. And it really just snowballed from there to the point that it seemed crazy to go back into banking.
You guys founded in New York, had a couple pop-up shops. If I understand, you guys were in the Oculus, right, for a little bit?
Yeah.
So and that's only, a 6-month rotation that they allow companies in there. Had some success. That's where your network is. So why come back to Utah?
You try living in a tiny 963 square foot apartment with 4 kids and running your business out of it, and it'll answer your question why we came to Utah. But and that's definitely partly true, but we needed to build out the team. But really it was the need to. We've really got something. This isn't just a fun hobby or a great idea. There's a lot of demand for what we're selling. Even at the price point we sell it, because we use really high-end materials, so it's expensive. And I know there's a lot of young, hungry talent in Utah. I've been hearing about that for a long time. And when we would come back and visit from Switzerland or New York, we could see that Utah was growing, but I had a lot of people that would tell me, Kurt, you've got to come here. There's so much young, hungry talent. You really need to build out your team here. Yeah, we started hiring when we got here, kept hiring, ended up needing to get an office. I never thought we'd have a store in Utah because, as I've said, our price point's high. And I'm from Utah, and Utah can be pretty cheap, so I didn't think we'd have much of a market here. But we opened a store in City Creek, and I'm an optimist because I'm an entrepreneur, but our store's gone even a lot better than we expected.
Talk about manufacturing. You guys have a high standard. I mean, because like you said, you source your leather from a French tannery. It dates back to the 1600s.
Yeah,
so it's not like you call up just some random person and say, send me some leather. How have you navigated manufacturing? Because that's a tricky one, especially when you have high quality, like high standard.
Yeah, no, it's tough. There are only 2 manufacturers in the U.S. that we would consider from the beginning. Really, there's only one we would use for our bags, and there were two that we would use for our wallets, and we ended up just using one of them primarily out of Los Angeles. We manufacture iPhone cases in China, so even though we'll fly the leather from France to China, it's tough, but ultimately it pays in the end. So I don't talk a lot about numbers. We don't share a lot of our numbers. Our return rate is less than 1%. That's insane.
You know, a lot of entrepreneurs out there and people who are wanting to start a business. What advice do you give people who come up to you and say, hey, I'm looking into starting a business, whether it's consumer goods, whether it's something else? What's the advice you give them?
Buckle up. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, but man, it's a ride. My wife hates that I use that answer. She's like, it sounds so pessimistic. It is. It's tough. I love it. I was really fortunate that I loved what I did in banking. I think that's made it a lot easier to deal with the rides of being an entrepreneur and the ups and downs, because I'm not questioning, looking back and thinking, oh, that was so much easier. It was a lot easier. But I also love what I'm doing, and I've said this a couple times, it's a drug. We literally lived in a 963 square foot apartment with 4 kids, and our apartment was at times like a third of it was full of packages and product that we needed to ship out. It's so much harder than anybody ever explained, and it doesn't mean that's a bad thing. There are a lot higher highs than I had expected.
Tell us a little bit, maybe some lessons that you've learned, and talk about maybe a failure that you've had that may allow everybody to learn something so they don't fall victim to the same thing.
It's convenience. It's a convenient hire. It's, hey, this person's available, let's hire them. And it's really hard not to do that. In the last 3 weeks, it has been really hard to not just hire some of the people we're interviewing. I'm sure you all know Davis Smith at Cotopaxi. That's something he's really pushed me on. He said, Kurt, you don't hire someone until you have 3 candidates you would hire, and then you choose one of them. That is really hard to do, especially when you're moving so quickly, but you'll pay for it down the road. We've had people like Barney's, Nordstrom, and you look at some of these bigger retail shops where it makes sense to put our product in there. And that's kind of been a struggle for us to say we're still not gonna go there. And the reason why is we can control the story. If you look at our website and you look at the product, there's so much that you don't see. You have no idea it's so functional. You have no idea it will actually make your life a lot easier. It's not just a high price point because it looks prettier, because we say it's the best materials. And I think that that's actually helped us grow, because it's, look, this is who we are and this is how we're gonna grow. And it's hard because sometimes we'll say yes to things and we realize, okay, no, we really need to stay on this track. And so it's difficult because as people start buying your product or using your product, that may tell you who your market really is. You may think it's this, but it's that. But if you can really be vigilant in looking at it that way and recognizing, okay, how do we do this? Who is it that we're really selling to? If we were on Amazon, I'm sure we'd sell a lot. And maybe one day we get there, but maybe we don't.
Well, we appreciate your time, and let's give it up for Kurt.